Templars of the Void, Chronicles of Thexia Etherian. Episode 1, The Stone in the Pocket. Lysara IV, age 8. The garden behind the Etherian residence on Lysara IV breathed with the slow, deliberate rhythm of evening after rain. The air hung heavy and cool, carrying the sharp mineral tang of wet stone paths mixed with the sweet, almost cloying perfume of star lilies that only unfurled their pale petals once the twin moons rose. Droplets still clung to every leaf and blade of grass, catching the silver-gold moonlight and turning the entire garden into a living constellation of tiny, trembling lights. The grass underfoot was soft and spongy, cool against bare skin, releasing a faint, earthy scent with every step. In the distance, beyond the low stone wall that bordered the family grounds, the faint hum of orbital traffic could be heard. A low, constant vibration that never quite faded. A reminder that even here, on this peaceful inner world, the galaxy's wars were never truly far away. Far above, the faint shimmer of Temple Mount hung like a distant promise against the stars. Its presence felt more than seen, a quiet pressure on the edge of perception. Thexia Etherian sat on the low garden wall, knees drawn up tight to her chest, arms wrapped around her shins. She was 8 years old, already taller than most children her age, with the long, quiet limbs and watchful gaze that would one day define her. Her dark hair fell loose across one shoulder, still damp from the earlier rain, sticking slightly to her simple tunic. She did not fidget. She did not speak. She simply watched, the way she had learned to watch everything. Quietly, completely, letting the world reveal its edges before she moved. Below her, 6-year-old Alethea darted between the hedges like a living spark that refused to be caught. Her golden hair, still wild and free, not yet tamed into the ceremonial braids their mother favored, caught the firefly light as she laughed and reached for the glowing insects. One slipped through her cupped hands and spiraled upward in a lazy, drunken arc. Alethea chased it with pure, unthinking delight, bare feet slapping the damp grass, her small voice ringing out into the twilight like bells. The sound was bright and careless, the kind of laughter that made the garden feel safer just by existing.
Thexia's mouth curved in the smallest, private smile. She loved that sound. It was the sound of someone who still believed the world had no hidden roots or slick edges waiting to trip her. It made the vastness of the galaxy feel smaller, safer, for just a moment. From the upper terrace, their father's voice carried down on the evening breeze. Zeus Etherian spoke in that low, measured cadence he used when the weight of fleets and impossible decisions pressed upon him. The words themselves were half lost to distance, but the tone was unmistakable, tight with concern about rim patrols, about the growing Jakari pressure along the outer corridors, about the need for restraint even when every instinct screamed for decisive force. Lysandra answered softer, the way she always did when she was trying to remind him that the galaxy was not only war and command. Her voice carried the gentle lilt of a healer who had seen too many bodies broken by decisions made in haste. Their conversation blurred together into a familiar rhythm, father's gravity, mother's steadying light. Thexia absorbed it the way she absorbed everything, quietly, completely, without interrupting. She understood, even at 8, that some voices carried more than words. They carried the alignment of the whole. Alethea stumbled. Her foot caught on a hidden root near the ornamental pond. The edge was slick with moss and leftover rain, the water below dark and still, reflecting the twin moons like twin black mirrors. For a single heartbeat, everything slowed. Alethea's arms windmilled, her small body tilting forward, momentum carrying her toward the dark water, The pond was deeper than it looked. Thexia knew this because she had once dropped a stone into it and never heard the splash reach bottom. The stones at the bottom were sharp. The water was cold this time of night. If Alethea fell, the shock would steal her breath, the edges would cut her knees and palms, and the laughter would shatter into frightened sobs that would echo through the garden long after the moons had set. Thexia moved before the thought had time to finish forming. She pushed off the wall, bare feet hitting the wet grass with a soft slap. 3 strides, but her legs were still short, still limited by a child's body. The damp ground sucked at her soles, slowing her. She reached out, fingers stretching, heart hammering against her ribs. Alethea was already tipping past the point of balance, her golden hair swinging forward like a curtain. Thexia's hand closed on the back of her sister's tunic. The fabric bunched in her small fist. She pulled. For one terrifying second, nothing happened. Alethea's weight continued forward, dragging Thexia with her. Thexia's bare toes dug into the slick moss, slipping. Her free arm flailed for balance. Her shoulder burned with the sudden strain. She was only 8, her muscles still soft with childhood, not yet strengthened by the Order's training. The pond's edge loomed closer. She could smell the cold mineral water now, could see the faint ripples, where Alethea's shadow already touched the surface. A flash of genuine fear cut through her, sharp and cold, like the water waiting below. What if she wasn't strong enough? What if her arms gave out and Alethea fell anyway? What if she failed the very first time someone needed her? The thought made her stomach twist. For a heartbeat, she wanted to let go, to run back to the safety of the wall and pretend she hadn't seen anything. The fear was real, visceral, a child's fear of not being enough. But she didn't let go. She planted her feet harder, knees locking, and yanked with everything she had. Her arms trembled violently. A small, involuntary sound escaped her throat, half grunt, half whimper. The tunic fabric strained. Alethea gave a startled yelp as her momentum reversed. Thexia's toes slipped again, but she dug them in once more, ignoring the burn in her shoulders and the fear still clawing at her chest. Inch by painful inch, she pulled her sister back onto solid ground. Alethea's feet scrabbled for purchase, kicking up wet grass and mud that splattered across Thexia's shins. Finally, both girls stumbled backward together, landing in a tangled heap on the damp grass. Alethea blinked up at her, eyes wide with indignation rather than fear. Water droplets clung to her lashes like tiny stars. "I was fine." "You were not," Thexia said, breathing hard. Her voice cracked on the last word, the fear still trembling just beneath the surface. She swallowed it down, forcing her tone steady, even though her arm still shook and her shoulder ached fiercely. She brushed a wet leaf from Alethea's shoulder with careful fingers, feeling the damp warmth of her sister's skin beneath the tunic. "Next time, look where your feet are going. The pond is deeper than it looks, and the fall would have hurt more than you think. The water's cold this time of night, and the stones at the bottom are sharp." Alethea pouted for a moment, lower lip trembling, then grinned and darted off again, the near fall already forgotten in the joy of the chase. Thexia stayed where she was for a long moment, sitting in the wet grass, chest heaving. She flexed her fingers, feeling the burn in her shoulder and the faint tremor in her arms. She was only 8. Her body was still small, still limited. Pulling Alethea back had taken everything she had at that moment. and it had been barely enough. The flash of fear lingered, a cold echo in her chest. What if next time the weight was heavier? What if she wasn't strong enough then either? True bravery, she was beginning to understand, in that childish, instinctive way, wasn't the absence of fear. It was feeling the fear and reaching anyway. Later, when the house had gone quiet and the twin moons climbed higher, Lysandra found her eldest daughter still sitting on the wall. The air had cooled considerably, carrying the faint mineral tang of the garden soil and the distant, almost imperceptible hum of Temple Mount, visible even from Lysara the Fourth. A faint shimmer against the stars like a promise and a warning at once. The star lilies had opened fully now, their perfume thicker, almost intoxicating in the stillness. "You protect her without being asked," her mother said, voice soft but carrying the weight of careful observation. Lysandra sat beside her on the wall, close enough that their arms brushed. The rough weave of her mother's sleeve brushed Thexia's skin, a coarse, familiar texture from years of practical healer's robes, slightly scratchy against bare arm. Her footsteps had made a soft, deliberate sound on the stone path, the kind of measured tread that spoke of someone who had learned to move carefully around the injured. Lysandra's fingers were warm, calloused from years of medical work, yet gentle as she reached out and brushed a strand of damp hair from Thexia's face. Thexia shrugged, small shoulders tight under her simple tunic. Someone has to. She doesn't see the edges yet. She runs toward the light without looking for what might be hidden beneath it. Tonight, I almost wasn't strong enough. My arms hurt. My feet slipped. For a second I was scared I would let her fall. I wanted to let go and run back to the wall. Lysandra pulled her into a gentle embrace. Thexia rested her head against her mother's shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of herbal salve mixed with the faint starch of the robe. She felt the steady rise and fall of Lysandra's chest, the rough texture of the sleeve against her cheek, the quiet strength in her mother's arms. "You were strong enough tonight," her mother whispered. "And the fear you felt, that is not weakness. That is what makes the reaching matter. True bravery is feeling the fear and doing the right thing anyway. I am proud of you for that." Lysandra reached into her own pocket and pressed a small, smooth moonrock into Thexia's palm. Warm from her own skin, polished by years of being carried or held during quiet moments of reflection. It was a piece of Lysera IV's nearest moon, veined with faint silver that caught the moonlight like distant stars. The surface was cool and slightly porous, fitting perfectly against Thexia's fingers, as if it had been waiting for her hand all along. "One day it will not be just your sister," Lysandra said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried the depth of someone who had seen too many broken bodies and too many broken decisions. "One day it will be someone the whole galaxy needs kept safe. That weight does not ask permission. It simply arrives. When it does, remember this stone came from home. It remembers where you began. And it will remind you that protection is not always about force. Sometimes it is about seeing the edge before anyone else does, and choosing not to let them fall, even when your arms are tired and your heart is afraid. That is the hardest kind of strength, Thexia, the kind no one sees until it is too late, or until it saves everything." Thexia closed her fingers around the moonrock. It felt heavier than its size suggested, as if it already carried the promise she would one day make. The silver veins seemed to pulse faintly in the moonlight, warm against her skin despite the evening chill. She slipped it into the inner pocket of her tunic, right over her heart, where it would stay for the rest of her life. A quiet talisman against the day the weight finally settled fully on her shoulders. They sat together in silence for a long time, the garden breathing around them. Alethea's laughter had faded into the house, replaced by the soft sounds of bedtime preparations. Zeus's voice drifted down once more from the terrace, quieter now, speaking to someone on a comm channel about tomorrow's departure schedules. The air grew cooler, the star lilies glowing brighter, their perfume thickening until it felt like the entire garden was wrapping them in a gentle embrace. Lysandra's sleeve brushed Thexia's arm again, the rough weave a grounding reminder of home. Lysandra finally stood, the soft sound of her footsteps on the stone path echoing gently as she brushed a strand of hair from Thexia's face with the same gentle precision she used when treating wounds. You are already more than I was at your age. That both fills me with pride and terrifies me. Come inside. Tomorrow is a long day. The next morning, the recruitment shuttle waited on the landing pad behind the residence, engines humming low and patient, a deep vibration that traveled up through the stone steps and into Thexia's bare feet. The air smelled of cool morning dew and the faint metallic tang of shuttle exhaust. She stood on the steps in the plain gray tunic all new initiates wore, her small pack slung over one shoulder. She was 8, the standard age when the Templar Order began shaping those who showed even the faintest promise of alignment. Zeus Aetherian knelt, so they were eye level. His armor still carried the faint ozone scent of the morning's command drills, sharp and electric against the garden's softer smells. The lines around his eyes were already deepening from years of bearing the galaxy's decisions. He placed a heavy hand on her shoulder, the same hand that commanded fleets and made choices that could save or doom worlds. You are not going to be a soldier like the others, he told her. His voice was low, rough with emotion he rarely showed. You are going to stand where most cannot, behind the ones who speak for everyone. That place is lonelier than any battlefield. It demands restraint when every instinct screams for action. It demands silence when others demand glory. It demands that you see the threat before it becomes a threat, and choose whether to let it pass or to stop it without breaking the larger balance. Are you ready for that weight, my daughter? Thexia looked past him to the shuttle, then back at her father. The moon rock pressed warm against her chest, a small, steady anchor. She thought of Alethea's laughter, of the near fall by the pond, and the burn in her own arms as she pulled her sister back, of the flash of fear that had made her want to let go. Her throat tightened. When she spoke, her voice cracked just a little, the childish hesitation slipping through despite her best effort to sound brave. Will I still get to come home? Whenever the Order allows it, Zeus said. His hand tightened briefly on her shoulder, not painful, but certain. But from today, your first duty is to keep the voices that matter from being silenced. Protect the alignment. Protect what keeps the whole from breaking. That is the role of a protector, not to chase every shadow, but to stand ready so the right voices can still speak when the stars grow dark. Lysandra stepped forward then, pulling Thexia into a tight embrace. Her mother's robe smelled of antiseptic and the herbal salve she used in the healing halls, a comforting, familiar scent that always made Thexia feel safe. The rough weave of the sleeve brushed Thexia's cheek as Lysandra held her close, the fabric slightly scratchy against her skin. Lysandra's arms were strong, her cheek warm against Thexia's hair. "You carry more than a stone in your pocket now," she whispered. "You carry our hope. Come back to us when you can. And remember, restraint is not weakness. It is the sharpest blade of all. Tonight you learned that even when your arms are small and your feet slip, the choice to reach is what matters most. Feeling the fear and reaching anyway, that is true bravery." Alethea appeared at the top of the steps, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her small face crumpling when she saw the shuttle. "You're leaving?" Thexia knelt and pulled her sister into a hug. Alethea's hair smelled of the garden and the sweet soap their mother used. Her small arms wrapped tight around Thexia's neck. The hug made Thexia's throat tighten again. When she spoke, her voice cracked once more, the words trembling at the edges. "I have to go learn how to keep people safe. Like I kept you safe last night by the pond. But I'll come back, I promise." Alethea sniffled but nodded, pressing a small, sticky kiss to Thexia's cheek. "Don't forget the fireflies." "I won't." She did not cry as she walked up the ramp, but as the hatch began to close, she turned once at the top, raised her hand in a small wave, and felt her lower lip tremble. The fear was still there, sharp and real. The fear of leaving home, of the unknown weight waiting for her, of not being strong enough when the time came. She swallowed it down, stepped inside, and let the hatch seal with a soft hiss. As Lysara the Fourth fell away beneath the clouds and the stars sharpened into view through the viewport, she pressed her hand over the pocket where the moon rock rested and whispered the only promise she needed, her voice still carrying the faintest crack of a child saying goodbye. "I will keep them safe." The journey to Temple Mount took hours that felt like days. The other young initiates chattered or slept or stared out the viewports with wide eyes. Thexia sat apart, quiet, turning the promise over in her mind like the stone in her pocket. She did not yet know the service corridors she would one day walk in silence, the threats she would silence before they could speak, or the man whose voice she would one day guard with her life. She only knew the wait had begun, and even with the fear still lingering in her chest, she was ready to carry it.